I spent the last 5 days traveling around Olympic National Park, and here are my top 10 favorite things that I've done. First thing is Hurricane Ridge. So this is kind of a pretty popular section of the park. It's near one of the main gateway towns, and it's about a 45-minute drive to get up to Hurricane Ridge. But once you're up there, you have the best views of the Olympic Mountains that you're going to get in your whole visit at Olympic National Park. Really a spectacular ridge with these like deep, huge valleys and just a panorama of mountain peaks. Kind of reminded me of the Alps a little bit. I just thought it was fantastic seeing all those peaks out there in the distance. Now, you can also look the other direction. Since it's a ridge, you can actually kind of look down into two valleys. You can look the other direction and see the ocean. So that's a pretty cool thing that you can do. Unfortunately, they had like a lodge or a visitor center there that had been there since the 50s, but it burned down last year. So unfortunately, there's nothing else there at Hurricane Ridge. They've now built a few temporary structures there, but basically it's just the views. You can also do the hike. So I did this. It's about a 4-mile hike to get up to a higher viewpoint. Pretty memorable thing, actually. There's a lot of people doing it. In fact, so many people do it that they have paved the entire trail going up there. So it's a pretty popular thing to do. And really, really cool views of the Olympic Mountains. That was really special viewpoint. Okay, so the next thing is Port Townsend. This is a historic little town on the waterfront. It's got a little vibe going on with it. It's quite a lively town there. It's historic. It's got all these old buildings from the Victorian era. So like late 1800s, early 1900s, pretty cute little buildings and stuff like that. So you can walk through and just do some street shopping and all that. I found that to be pretty interesting. And then also like you can walk along the waterfront. They have this replica of a whale skeleton out there. Everybody thinks it's a dinosaur, but it's actually a whale skeleton. That was pretty cool to look at. And then my understanding, somebody told me there that much of the town is haunted. Okay, so they have something called the Manresa Castle there that you can eat or stay in, and it's haunted. So anyway, Port Townsend was an interesting town to shop around in for sure. Okay, next up is waterfalls. There are some really cool waterfalls in Olympic. So Mare Falls is a really popular one, and Sol Duc Falls is a really popular one. Both these require a little hike to get to them. They are really nice, and they're just like tucked away in the forest. So you get these nice forest walk, and then you get the waterfall there. Sol Duc Falls was one of the cooler areas, honestly, that I've ever seen. Like that was a place you just want to sit down and enjoy for quite a while if you get to Sol Duc Falls. That was a cool spot. Okay, next up is the hot springs. This might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but I really, really liked the hot springs. I mean, how often is it that you get to sit in hot springs in a national park? Well, in the last year, I've actually done that twice because I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is a national park, and I actually soaked in the hot springs there. And then here in Olympic, I soaked in the hot springs. These are called the Sol Duc Hot Springs, and it's a little business that's been there for a long time, and now today I think it's run by a concessionaire, Aramark, but they have developed hot springs. So the water comes in naturally from the mountain. They just add some cold water to it. The temperatures are like 104 to 107, and you do get a little bit of that sulfur smell. That doesn't bother me, but some people it bothers a little bit because it is just the natural springs from the mountain. But I found it just such a really, really nice variety and break to my day. So I'd been hiking quite a bit, and I was like, I just wanted to chill out and get in the water and just relax for a while. So I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And there weren't really all that many people there the day that I went, so it was totally worth it. Soaking in the hot springs, again, something kind of unusual in a national park, but I liked it quite a bit. Next up is the hole in the wall. Now this was epic. So this is right on the coast of Washington. It's actually in the national park, and you have to hike out there. It's about 1.5 miles to get out to the hole in the wall. But once you get there, you can walk through the hole in the wall. So there's kind of a formation, a C-stack or a wall that comes out, but then there's this hole through it, so you can kind of scramble through the hole. That's fun. And then you get to look for all these sea creatures in the tide pools. So I found all these anemones and just little creatures all over the place. It was actually really fun. I enjoyed it a ton. Now you need to do it at low tide. You can't get into the hole in the wall if the tides are like over 5 feet or something like that. So there's these tide charts you have to check and make sure you're getting there at the right time or whatever. I just had a blast. I really, really enjoyed that. The hole in the wall, one of my favorite things I did. If we haven't met yet, my name's Matt. Me and my wife, we write travel guides for places in the West. You can get those on our website at we'reintherockies.com to help you travel to these places. Okay, next up is a little surprise for this list, but it's John's Beachcombing Museum. This is in Forks, Washington. I was debating whether go there, but because I was kind of tired, but I decided, well, I better go check it out. And I'm so glad I did, because I got to talk to John. So John is a guy who's beach combed, which means he just goes out to the beach and collects junk. And he's done this for over 40 years. And you will be amazed at how much stuff he has collected and put in this, like, it's at his house, actually. He's called it a museum. It is a museum, but it's at his house. He used to be like a plumber or something. He had like a garage with all of his stuff, and now he's retired. So he's moved all of his stuff in there, his beachcombing stuff, and it's now a museum. So he's got all these creations in his front yard from buoys and things like that. But then if you go in the museum, it's a $5 entrance to get in there. He will show you some of the amazing stuff that he's collected. Okay, so the stuff that stood out to me was he had an anchor chain from like 1400s in there that he found. He has collected a bunch of stuff from the 2011 tsunami in Japan. So big tsunami in Japan, and it all washes across the ocean, and he collects it. And so a bunch of stuff he returned back to Japan. Like, they found the owners of these things. It was crazy. He collected one volleyball that had all this Japanese writing on it, and him and another guy, they tried to go find the owner in Japan, but they couldn't find the owner, and so he has the volleyball sitting there. And they actually did a movie about this volleyball journey across the sea and then trying to find the owners. And oh my gosh, like, the story was just awesome. And then he said, like, the kind of the holy grail of things to find in the ocean are these glass balls. They're Japanese glass balls that the fishermen would use back in the early 1900s. They don't really make them anymore, but like I said, the Japanese fishermen would use them. Well, they floated across the ocean, and he's collected a bunch of these. I mean, there were so many things in that museum. Like, it was a total treasure. I loved the stories behind it. So I would highly recommend going to John's Beachcombing Museum. Okay, next up is Cape Flattery. Cape Flattery is the most northwest point in the lower 48 states. I drove about an hour and a half to get there from Forks. I stopped in Nia Bay. Nia Bay has, all that's actually on the Makah Indian Reservation. So I stopped in, you have to get like a permit. So you stop at the museum and you pay your $20. You can drive out to Cape Flattery. It does require a little trail to get to the very, very tip point, and then from there you have some really amazing views of the ocean, and then there's a lighthouse out there. And anyway, the water was really had a deep blue color to it. It was cool. That was a pretty fun little spot, actually. I really enjoyed Cape Flattery. Next up is the lodges in Olympic National Park. So I went to all the lodges. There's 4 of them. There's the Lake Crescent Lodge, the Duc Hot Springs Lodge, the Quinault Lodge, which is on the beach, and then the Lake Quinault Lodge, which is technically not in the national park, but is a really beautiful lodge perched on Lake Quinault here. Anyway, I thought the lodges were fantastic. Like, they're not like big fancy like some of the other ones. Like Mount Rainier had the Paradise Inn, and that was a real big fancy log one, you know. They weren't really like that, but they were just kind of charming. A lot of them were really pretty charming lodges, and you know, you can stop in and eat with a view, something like that. You can stay there, of course, if you have the money for it, and if you can get the reservations well in advance. But I liked visiting the lodges, and I thought they were pretty charming. Okay, the next step is the forest. Now, where I come from, wide open vistas, okay? So like the Rocky Mountain West, there's not a lot of forests and trees. I mean, there's plenty of forests, but like you have all this wide open area. Not so here in the Pacific Northwest. Everywhere you drive, you are in the heart of the forest, it feels like. And at first I feel like a little claustrophobic. Like, not actually claustrophobic, but you know, I feel like everything's kind of closed in, and it bothers me that I can't see out, because that's what I think of as beauty, is like the vistas and all that. And so that's kind of annoying. Like, I can't see the mountains, you know. But I have to say, you know, the forest, of course, it has its own charms. Everything has its own charms, you know. I did come to enjoy it. Especially, my favorite part is when the sun starts shining through, and then you kind of have the sun lighten up the leaves and stuff like that. So this morning I was in the whole rainforest, and it was on this beautiful trail, and the sun came out, and that was pretty memorable. I really enjoyed it. Not gonna lie, I'm probably ready to go back to the wide open vistas, but I did come to really enjoy the forest after a few days. Next up is Ruby Beach. Gorgeous beach with these sea stacks. By the way, I didn't know what sea stacks were until I got here, but basically just rocks that kind of stick up from the ocean there, from the beach. And that's where you're gonna find the tide pools. So I went over to Ruby Beach today and found starfish. That was so awesome, like orange starfish and blue and purple. I mean, that was fascinating to see all the starfish hanging on for dear life on those sea stacks on the rocks there. Ruby Beach was really fun. I mean, it had an energy and a vibe to it. People there playing in the water, walking the beach, looking for the tide pools and stuff like that. I mean, I'm here alone, which is kind of a bummer. If my family had been here with me, we would have spent all day at Ruby Beach, I'm sure. That was a really, really cool place. Okay, next one I'm going to bring up is lakes. So this is Quinault Lake right here, Lake Quinault. Now, again, technically I don't think this is in the park. The border's just right up here, but it's basically part of the park. Lake Crescent is another really beautiful lake in Olympic National Park. And these are two really, really beautiful lakes. So if you're a lake lover, or you want to get out on the water with like some kayaks, some paddle boards, canoes, you can rent them here, and you can rent it at Lake Crescent and go out and play on the water. That's a good way to do it. And they're really, really beautiful lakes surrounded by the mountains with a lodge on them. So fantastic. Okay, next up is the totem poles that you'll see around. I didn't get too many pictures of these totem poles because I didn't realize how many I was going to see. And I kept seeing them, like, that's pretty cool. And then I see another one, that's kind of cool. And so I liked seeing all the totem poles around. Some of these are on the Indian reservations that are around the park. Some of them are not. It's just kind of a thing around here. It seems like the totem poles, cool decorations, cool carvings, cool paintings. So I like seeing the totem poles all around. Okay, I have a few more videos on Olympic National Park that you can check out, as well as Mount Rainier. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, go west, young traveler.